Due to the increase of COVID-19 cases, we had to adjust our event arrangements, and we thank you for your understanding. Thankfully, we have all learned to adapt during this unpredictable moments, and with that, we're excited to be with you today. At this time, I would like for you to join me and stand and remain standing during the presentation of colors, the prayer, and the pledge. The presentation of colors today is provided by the City of Edinburg Fire and Police Department Honor Guard. Please, if everyone can please stand.
Ready, hold, left, face, present, colors.
Please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order, colors. Right, face, forward, march.
Please remain standing as we do our invocation. We'd like to take this time before our invocation to make sure that we thank the City of Edinburg, the Edinburg Police and Fire Department for helping us. Thank you, Chief Snyder, for all your support. If you can please bow your heads as we pray before we start this program. Oh Heavenly Father, we thank you today for bringing us together as a community. Lord, we ask you that you provide us with your hand of safety. As we are going through these times, Lord, we ask you that you continue to protect each and every one of us. But we ask you for special favor, Lord, for our elected officials, for our government, for our public servants, for our city teams that are out there, Lord. We ask you that you continue to give them the strength and the courage. And we ask you that you continue to protect those that are going through this crisis, Lord, that you give them the strength and their families. We are here today, Lord, to make sure that we are informed, that we are educated, that we're made aware of what's going on, but at the same time, we are here to make sure that we are still surviving, that we will stay strong, that we are your servants, Lord, and we will continue our work, and we will be your servants. We pray this in Jesus' name, amen. If you can all please take a seat. All those that wish to go ahead and continue to pick up their breakfast can do so at this time as well. But right now, I'd like to make sure that I want to thank all our public officials who are with us today. And I want to make sure that we recognize all of our officials that are with us. And I know there's so many with us, so I'd ask if our public officials or elected officials can please stand at this time for a round of applause. Thank you. A special thanks to our Pathfinder Public Affairs for our diamond sponsor for this event. Thank you. I know that they know government. Thank you, Judge Ramirez and all the Pathfinder staff for your continued service to our region. I'd also want to make sure that we recognize our board of directors who are present with us today. Our president, Veronica Gonzalez, Mr. Michael Williamson, Hiram Govan, Julio Carranza, and Dina Aragus. Big round of applause for our board members. We thank you, our ambassadors, our members, and the City of Edinburg for continued support of the Edinburg Chamber and its mission. At this time, we will have a welcome from the City of Edinburg Mayor Richard Molina.
So I want to thank everybody for being here, and I'm especially excited about having a gentleman that we work hand in hand together here with the city of Edinburg. I want to thank him, because he could have said, you know what, I'm not going to show up. But I want to thank you, Senator. If we can have a round of applause for Senator Hinojosa for the job that he does for us on the state level. You know, we need you there. We need a senior senator like yourself, a former Marine, a former veteran. But I just want to let you know that on behalf of the mayor and the Edinburg City Council, you always have a home here in Edinburg. And you're never going to forget that you're one of our alumni here from Pan American. So I know you're never going to forget that, Senator. So a little bit about Edinburg, as you know, and maybe you don't, but Edinburg is the fastest growing city in the Rio Grande Valley. And it's not our neighbors to the south. It's not our brothers at far. It's not over in Mission. It's not in Brownsville, but it's here in Edinburg. So we are truly blessed to see an explosion here of the things that are happening. We just finished giving out some funds, and that was through the partnership that we have with the federal government and the state. I do want to thank our EDC board that is here. If you're on the EDC board, could you please stand up? Let's have a round of applause for them. The reason I want to acknowledge them is because they just partnered up with the city, and we approved a downtown revitalization plan that is going to put synergy, and it's going to put business in our downtown area. They just approved a partnership with the county. Ms. Eli Torres, thank you for coming through with that parking garage to alleviate the traffic in the downtown area. Also, the Sam Houston building finally got done. The Arts and Event Center is going to be big, and so is the amphitheater. So thank you very much for the volunteer work that you all do and partnering up with us and seeing the vision. Sabrina just walked in late. Thank you for everything you do as well. So without further ado, I'm not going to take much more time, but I just want to thank everybody for taking the time out of their busy schedules. God bless everybody, and we're always a phone call away here at the city, and we have a strong partnership with the chamber. And Ronnie, thank you for all that you do. An excellent job with your team coordinating this. And Mario, thank you for being persistent and continuing to hold this event. It's a very, very special morning, and we're glad that everybody's here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much. And yes, thank you, Ronnie and staff, for doing such a great job. They're so, they're so helpful, and they work so hard to make sure every event is great. At this time, I want to make sure that we will go ahead and move on to our legislative briefing. And of course, we have a great moderator today. Veronica Gonzalez is a Senior Vice President for Governmental and Community Relations to the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. She's a recognized leader in public and private sectors, having over 20 years of experience in negotiating and advocating to obtain results. As an attorney, mediator, state legislator, fundraiser, and now working in government and community relations. Veronica is an active in her community and sits on numerous boards throughout the Rio Grande Valley. Please welcome the President of the Edinburg Chamber of Commerce and today's moderator, Veronica Gonzalez.
Good morning, everyone. Is it this one? Oh, here we go. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for coming out on a Friday morning. It's TGIF, right? Friday. We're all happy to be here, and I know that this morning you're going to enjoy what I believe will be an informative legislative update. I have to start by apologizing. I always hate to start by apologizing, but we promised you 3 legislators, and you will only hear from 2. Congressman Gonzalez had planned to be here in person, but he had a commitment that he could not get out of, and so he put together an update by video that we're going to be presenting here shortly. He said he wanted to send his sincerest apologies for not being able to be here live. And then late yesterday afternoon, I got a call from Representative Canales' office, and due to medical reasons, he was not able to join us this morning. And in case you're wondering, no, it's not COVID. But we wish him well. We told him, your health comes first. Please go ahead and get to your doctor, and we look forward to seeing you the next time around. We wish him a very speedy recovery. But on the positive side, we have with us this morning our dynamic Senator Juan Chuy Hinojosa, and he always comes through. I have to thank you, Senator. You're always so good about doing this, and you're always so well prepared. He's a pro at this, and I have so many areas that I'm going to cover with him today that I know we can easily take up the time of the program. So before we do that, we're going to start with the update from Congressman Vicente Gonzalez. But before we play the video, let me tell you a little bit about the congressman. I think y'all all know him personally, but there may be some information here that you don't know. He is serving his third term representing the 15th Congressional District of Texas in the United States House of Representatives. His district stretches from the Rio Grande Valley all the way up to the outer suburbs of San Antonio, and it includes 8 counties, including Hidalgo County. He is a member of the Financial Services Committee and the Committee on Foreign Affairs. He's also a member of the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus. In 2020, he received the Order of the Quetzal, the highest honor bestowed by the Guatemalan government. This award acknowledges officials whose artistic, civic, humanitarian, or scientific works merit special recognition. We are going to play now the video of Congressman Gonzalez. You may continue to serve yourselves, or they will serve you, but help yourselves. There's a lot of food here, so please be sure to fill up this morning. And so now we'll play the video and update from Congressman Gonzalez.
Hello to everyone attending today's Edinburg Chamber of Commerce Public Affairs Breakfast. Thank you for inviting me. I wish I could be there in person. I wanted to provide some updates on things I'm working on in Washington on behalf of the city of Edinburg and South Texas. At the forefront of everyone's mind is the surge in irregular migration and the slow and frustrating federal response. Please rest assured that I'm in contact with the Biden administration, Secretary Mayorkas, local government officials, hospitals, and nonprofits that are on the front lines of this crisis. I'm just as unhappy with the federal response as you are, and believe me, I have let the Biden administration know this. I was pleased that Secretary Mayorkas and Chief Ortiz came to visit last week and will work hard to ensure that we maintain open lines of communication all the time, not just during this crisis. I'm going to continue to be a loud voice for South Texas in Washington to ensure that we get the situation under control, secure our border communities, and provide relief for frontline organizations and workers, including hazard pay for Border Patrol agents. Another issue of concern is the rising COVID-19 case count and students going back to school. Texas is a big state. What may be good in policy for the Panhandle may not be the best for South Texas. And it's wrong for the governor from his mansion in Austin to tell our locally elected leaders how to protect our children. I believe in science and that we should listen to the advice of public health authorities to keep us safe. Unlike the governor, I believe that masks should be required to keep our schools, students, teachers, and essential workers safe. Masks shouldn't be political, and I stand with those schools that have defied the governor's recent mandate and applaud them for putting our children first. Our leaders can count on me to support them in these efforts. I did not expect to see shutdowns similar to what we saw last summer, but the rise in cases is a significant concern. We know who's being impacted by this new rise, and we know the best strategy to fight against the terrible virus, the best thing we can do to take care of each other and our community, is to get vaccinated. I urge everyone that is hesitant to please reconsider their position and please do their part to fight against this virus by getting vaccinated. Part of the vaccination process is ensuring we have the infrastructure to vaccinate not only those in our country, but also our neighbors in Mexico and around the world. It's imperative we work on a multinational health strategy and keep our borders open to non-essential travel so we can boost economic activities in our region and other border communities who depend on cross-border trade, commerce, and tourism such as our area. And speaking of infrastructure, the Senate just passed a $1.1 trillion infrastructure package. This is a once-in-a-generation bipartisan package. It's the largest investment in our country's crumbling infrastructure in decades, and it's an honor to be part of such a historic piece of legislation. We're also showing the people in this country that the days of compromise are not over. This package was not a Democratic or Republican victory. It was an American victory. However, I do not approve of the approach that Speaker Pelosi has taken to hold the infrastructure bill until the budget proposal is passed by the Senate. This package is too important and too historic for our communities to wait. That's why I've called on the Speaker to bring this package to the floor for a vote immediately. This package is going to benefit Texas immensely. It will repair and rebuild roads and bridges with a focus on climate change mitigation, resilience, equity, and safety for all users, including cyclists and pedestrians. In Texas, there are 818 bridges and over 19,400 miles of highways in poor condition. Texas is expected to receive $26.9 billion in federal aid for highway apportion programs and $537 million for bridge replacement and repairs under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act over 5 years. This package is also going to help connect every American to reliable, high-speed internet. Texas will receive a minimum allocation of $100 million to help provide broadband coverage across the state, including providing access to the at least 1 million Texans who currently lack it. Broadband internet is necessary for Americans to do their jobs, to participate equally in school, learning, healthcare, and to stay connected. We saw the broadband deficiencies and gaps in our community highlighted throughout the COVID crisis, and this is going to make the proper investments to continue to build a broadband infrastructure for all communities, urban and rural. Before I wrap up my remarks, I want to let everyone know that I recently reintroduced the bipartisan Repatriate Our Patriots Act. This legislation seeks to give honorably discharged veterans who have been deported the ability to return home and a pathway to citizenship, the benefits they are rightfully owed. I can't emphasize this enough, that this bill is a bipartisan bill, and it's the promise the Biden administration made and is keeping to bring our heroes home. I'd encourage all of you to share information about the bill to your relatives and friends in other states and ask them to call their members of Congress to support it. Thank you again for inviting me to speak today. I'm sure we'll continue to be in touch as we work together to make our community a better place. Enjoy the rest of the forum. Stay safe. God bless America, and God bless South Texas.
Thank you to Congressman Gonzalez. And, you know, he mentioned the infrastructure bill that had passed the Senate. And speaking of the Senate, I did want to recognize two lovely ladies that are with us today, very hardworking ladies, Ana Garcia, Clarissa Sanchez. They work with Senator Cornyn's office. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. And now I'd like to call up our man of the hour, Senator Juan Chuy Hinojosa. Senator Hinojosa represents District 20 in the Texas Senate, which runs from Hidalgo County up to Nueces County, Corpus Christi. He has held public office for about 40 years, right?
Más o menos.
First in the Texas House of Representatives, and then in the Texas Senate, where he has served us since 2003. Senator Hinojosa has received the prestigious honor of being named a top 10 best legislator 3 times by Texas Monthly and 3 times by Capital Insight. For many sessions, he served as Vice Chair of Senate Finance, giving him a seat at the table when it comes to appropriations, and currently is Vice Chair of Redistricting and Vice Chair of Jurisprudence. He also sits on numerous other committees. There's only 31 senators, so they get a lot of committee assignments. We are especially proud at UTRGV, and I know he is too, that he was the author of the legislation that created UTRGV and the School of Medicine. And while I have that opportunity, I also would like to introduce y'all to our new Dean of the Medical School, who's with us this morning, Dr. Michael Hawker. Dr. Hawker, if you'll stand. He is, I think we're going to have some forums later where you'll get an opportunity to hear from Dr. Hawker as well. So thank you for being with us this morning. Senator, thank you for being here. We're going to do the kind of a living room type. Good morning, Senator, and thank you for making the time to be with us, especially when y'all are in the middle of a legislative session, special session that's going on. For many of you that may not know, the Texas Legislature meets every other year from January until the end of May, and they just met and thought they were going to come home. But then the governor called a special session. He has the right to do that. He calls a 30-day special session. They called one, it ended, and now they're on the second special session. And Senator, Ross Ramsey, who is the executive editor of the Texas Tribune, we all know him well, he recently wrote, The Texas Legislature is meeting, partisans are fighting, and there's a surge in COVID-19 cases just as the state's public schools are opening. Guess what's getting the least amount of attention from state lawmakers? Referring to the pandemic. And then the San Antonio Express-News said, there's a crisis in Texas that deserves the governor's full attention, but it's not on the U.S.-Mexico border. No, the crisis burning across our state, endangering lives, upending the start of school, filling hospitals, disrupting commerce, and dividing Texans is the surging Delta variant of COVID-19. And Governor Abbott has responded to this crisis by using all the powers of his office to muzzle local officials from enacting mask and vaccine mandates. The only urgency he has shown as Texans die from COVID-19 is in regard to the U.S.-Mexico border. So, Senator, it's no secret that COVID is surging, and it's for the third time now, and Texas and Florida are the states that seem to have the highest numbers. There's also a patchwork of orders that are being issued all around the state by county judges, defying the governor and ordering masks in schools. In response, Governor Abbott, who this week we learned also tested positive for COVID, has threatened that schools that require masks can lose state funding. So tell us, why isn't the legislature stepping in and making the health pandemic its top priority right now?
First of all, hello, there it is. First of all, thank you, Veronica, for the nice introduction. And for me, it's always nice to be back in the Valley. Being up in Austin, I describe Austin as the asylum house. Politics up there have gotten pretty nasty in a sense, but I guess to answer your question, it assumes that we're not paying attention or making COVID-19 a priority, especially right now with the Delta variant. We are. Even though we may not be debating some of these issues on the Senate floor, we, as part of government, working with Governor Abbott, have responded to the many needs and requests that are being made throughout the state of Texas to deal with the Delta variant. Excuse me. For example, I was part of the leadership team all of last year when we were not in session, distributing approximately $5 to $6 billion to the school districts of the state of Texas. Not only that, we're also providing hospital staff, nurses, medical technicians, equipment to the different hospitals throughout the state of Texas. We're also providing funding to help supplement and the unemployment benefits that many of our unemployed people were receiving. We also work with restaurants, trying to provide them help and assistance to making sure that they could survive during the pandemic. We also dealt with our daycare centers, providing subsidies to make sure that those essential workers who had children will have some place to leave their children in a safe place. So the fact is that there's a lot of information, a lot of action, a lot of activity going on behind the scenes that may not be public. Right now, with the Delta variant, it's a very dangerous disease, pandemic, and you can see all the number of people being, the increase in number of infections. I call it the pandemic of the unvaccinated. Over 90%, about 95% of the people that are now being hospitalized are people who have not been vaccinated. And that is what's happening. How we're dealing with it, we are getting requests from the different hospitals that they don't have the proper staff, they don't have the proper nurses, they don't have the proper equipment. They do have the beds, but they don't have the staff to be able to serve all the people are coming in asking for help because they're infected. What we have done, we again moved to mobilize the Health Services Department, State Health Services Department, TEDM, Texas Emergency Management Group, agency, to be able to bring from nurses from out of state, to bring medical personnel, to bring medical equipment. So we have mobilized our resources at the state level, and we're paying for that, money up front. So we are responding to that. Obviously, what gets the front page news is the issues dealing with our voting bills, our bail bond reform bills, social media issues, transgender issues, but there is a focus on the pandemic, and we are responding to the requests being made from the different regions of the state. So we are on top of that issue.
Well, let me ask you this, because, people say masks work, and it seems that it's been politicized even about masks, but nothing scares people more than thinking that their child may get sick, right? School started, and so some schools are saying, my child has to wear, a mask, and some parents are saying no. The governor's saying, it's up to the individual, it's up to the parents to decide, but the schools are feeling responsible for these children. Is the governor the only one that can order the mask mandates? Can the legislature step in? Can the courts step in? How is that gonna work?
In the 1970s, we passed what is called the Disaster Act, giving the governor quite a bit of authority and power when we're not in session. And unfortunately, he's using the power and authority. We've tried to rein in some of those powers, but there was a disagreement between the House and the Senate during the regular session as to how much power and authority to provide the governor to be able to respond in a disaster. Because the governor does need that type of power and authority. But how much? And there was the big debate. The other issue that's what's happening, and it's very unfortunate, it seems like any issue now that comes up is politicized. Instead of trying to focus on public policy, focus on the science, focus on research, we politicize every single issue. And it's really not good for the public. When you talk about masks, I think masks are one of the safest ways to stop and slow down the spread of COVID. When you're messing around with school children, let me tell you, parents, especially the moms, you'll hear from them. And we are getting swamped all over the state from the mothers, grandmothers calling us that the vast majority of them support requiring masks at our schools. 12-year-old children and under right now cannot be vaccinated. So they're the ones that are the most exposed. And if you look, we already had at least 4 or 5 schools shut down here in Texas. The number of patients going up in our hospitals are children. So it is a real issue, a real problem. And what is happening now, you see Governor Abbott, and we in the legislature don't necessarily agree with him. We push back, we communicate with him, we talk to his staff, and try to figure out a way to address this issue. Governor Abbott, unfortunately, sort of locked himself into this issue about no mask, seems to be in competition with Governor DeSantis out of Florida for political reasons, not because of health reasons. But as you well know, the Texas Supreme Court just overruled and refused to rule in favor of the state to ban a mask. The city of Austin, the county of Austin, Travis County, now their order to mandate mask stands. So the Supreme Court is trying to give Governor Abbott an out, because those decisions ought to be made by the parents, by the principals, by the students, by the community, not by Austin, not by Washington, D.C., but by us as to what do we need. Every region of the state is different. The urban areas are very different than the rural areas. So those decisions ought to be left up to the parents and local school districts, not the state. And I think right now what you're seeing, the Supreme Court finally stepped in and said, no, we will not interfere, go to the Court of Appeals, argue your case, trying to buy time to come up with a viable solution which will lead to students being required to wear a mask in school.
Well, let's move on to the legislation you made reference to earlier, which was the election or voter legislation. For weeks you couldn't turn on the news or get online without hearing about how Texas Democrats had left the state and gone to Washington, D.C. to break quorum and prevent a bill from passing that they argued was going to suppress voting, especially voting by the elderly or people of color. Speaker of the House, Dave Thielen, poor guy, it's his first session, Dave Phelan issued arrest warrants for the Democrats that were still missing. Some judges around the state, again, now got partisan issued orders to protect the Democrats, and then the Texas Supreme Court cleared the way for law enforcement to track them down and arrest them if they were still missing from the chamber. Just yesterday, there was a quorum for the first time. I think many in the audience, I know sometimes I do, have to be wondering, what is so bad about the election legislation that would cause Democrats to leave the state and risk arrest? What's so bad about it?
Well, we have to go back to the regular session, Senate Bill 7, that dealt with election integrity. If you go back to the last election, the presidential election, there were all type of misinformation about the election being stolen, about voter fraud, and there were 60 lawsuits filed. Some went up to the United States Supreme Court, and they all said there was no voter fraud, okay? That President Biden won fair and square. Coming out, and now seems to be a nationwide push, especially in Republican states, about election integrity. People ask, well, how much voter fraud is too much? Well, I think we can address those issues if we work together and identify those areas where there's issues and problems with mail-in ballots, where there are issues and problems in terms of making sure that we secure our ballots. I don't think anybody's for voter fraud. What happened is, at the last day of the session, there was a small group of Republicans on the House side that got together, who had an outside consultant out of Dallas, who rewrote the bill. Negotiation between the Democrats and Republicans and among ourselves was working. We'd come up with a sensible bill. It was tough, but we tried to focus on those issues that existed. Instead, what they did on the House side, they sent us a bill, number one, that did away with souls to the polls. Right? That's when churchgoers, African Americans, go vote on Sundays. Number two, they allowed a district court to be able to overturn an election on very slim evidence. Think about the chaos that would cause throughout the state. Every person, the law would file and contest an election trying to find a friendly judge. That was in the bill. Number three, they had all kinds of restrictions there on criminal penalties to local election officials. I think number four, and some of the stuff is still in there, they made it much more difficult to vote by mail. Right now, if you're 65 or over, your local elections official can mail out a ballot, an application for a ballot, because they already know who's 65 and over. So you just fill it out and send it in. Well, now they cannot do that. So at the end of the day, what it is, it places more voting restrictions on the general public. And it doesn't just hurt minorities, or African Americans and Hispanics. It also hurts older people who are many are Republicans. Even some of my Republican friends, they ask me, Chuy, what the heck are you all doing up there? You're criminalizing election traditions that we always have and carrying votes. So now the focus is also on voter harvesting, which I understand that. But a lot of those issues can be negotiated and worked out between us. I mean, I don't think anybody supports voter fraud. We all want our elections to be secure. But the way it was done was a fiasco. It was so bad that the Democrats broke quorum late at night out of the House at the end of the session, and it worked. In the meantime, the bill has changed. The new bill, while still not perfect, has taken out a lot of the more offensive provisions that were there in Senate Bill 7. Now Senate Bill 1, and we're still negotiating on that. Some of those issues that are being addressed is really more voter restrictions on the general public right to vote.
Well, and I know that there is a quorum now. Before there was a quorum, in fact, even your colleague, Senator Carol Alvarado, conducted a 15-hour filibuster. And, you know, I mean, this is, imagine, ladies, if you're in your heels or something, you're staying for 15 hours. She could not sit or lean on her desk. She couldn't take bathroom breaks. She couldn't drink water. And a few minutes after she finished her filibuster against the bill, then the Senate bill 18-11, down party lines, right? So why filibuster, one, if the bill's gonna pass anyway? And then what do you believe is gonna be the end game on this? And now that we do have a quorum, what do you think the end game will be?
Well, pretty interesting, but I think twice we had a filibuster during the regular session. We were up all night. I was asking questions at 3:30 in the morning. And this last filibuster, where Senator Alvarado filibustered, I was asking questions at 2 o'clock in the morning. You try that. After we've been up 24 hours with very little sleep. It's really a challenge. But what it is, every senator has the right to a filibuster, as long as you can stand. And a filibuster is a good tool to use towards the end of the session, because time will run out. At this point, it wouldn't make any difference. But Senator Alvarado felt very strongly about making a statement. And certainly, Senator Hughes, which by the way is an excellent senator from East Texas, very articulate, very well prepared, kept saying, read the bill, read the bill. So Senator Alvarado read the bill one by one all night long on all the issues and concerns that people in general had. It's not just Democrats. A lot of Republicans also have concerns the way the bill has been drafted. So it puts a spotlight on the issue. You get a lot of publicity to continue educating the public. And it makes a difference in a sense that issues may be pointed out that they didn't realize or happened. Let me give you another example. In the election bill, if you can prove any of the violations, they have a whole list of violations for which they can, you can file a lawsuit if you're the losing candidate. Or any common law violation, if you're the loser in an election, you can file a lawsuit against the person who won. And if you prove any, not even one violation, number one, you get paid $35,000 as a penalty. Number two, you get all the damages. Number three, you get to pay all your campaign expenses you spent reimbursed. Think about it. I told my Republican friends on the Senate floor.
Good for lawyers.
Great for lawyers. I said, what makes you think that we don't have Democrat lawyers that are willing to file lawsuits against the Republicans if you win? Right? It cuts both ways. So not just Democrats, it's also Republicans. It also applies on the primaries. So I said, you got to have Republican versus Republican filing lawsuits. So, well, I hadn't thought about that. Well, it is a problem. See, so those are the issues that sometimes a filibuster will be able to point out, and some of the challenges that those bills will impose in real life elections, not just on paper. For those of us who've been involved in campaigns, we know sometimes get very tough, very emotional, very passionate about it, and sometimes we have sore losers. Sore losers that will do anything to clog up the system, and that's a big problem. I think it's also important to point out about the filibuster. In the United States Senate, they also have a filibuster. It used to be the same rule, that you couldn't drink water, you couldn't move, you couldn't go to the bathroom, and then they did away with it. Now they take the easy way out. You can say, I'm a filibuster, and that means that's it, you stop the bill. You got your 60 votes, you don't have to even make any kind of sacrifice. And I think it just speaks well of Senator Alvarado, that she was willing to sacrifice, and it's not easy. You wear tennis shoes, not high heels.
Yeah.
You got prepared, but it's just another way to make a statement and shine a bright light on a very important issue that impacts all of us.
And so, in game, now that we know we have a quorum in the House, do you think that the bill in its current version will pass, or they'll continue to amend it?
The reality is that the Republicans have the majority vote in both in the Senate and in the House, so the bill will pass. But let me focus on the end game. When the House broke quorum the second time around, during the first special session, the end game and the purpose to go to Washington, D.C. will try to convince the U.S. Senate to pass legislation that would address some of these issues and not allow states to violate the Voting Rights Act. The Senate had the votes, but not enough to break a filibuster. It was being blocked by 60 Republicans. Right? So Senator Manchin from Virginia, West Virginia actually, made it very clear that he was not going to change the filibuster. He would not change the filibuster. So, and they received a lot of publicity and brought huge attention, media attention. But the reality is that it failed. It failed because Congress and the United States Senate will not do away with the filibuster. So they didn't accomplish that goal. To your point, yes, the bill will pass. In some shape or form, it will pass. But keep in mind, this also goes on in Democratic states, unfortunately. Right? In every state, the Democrats may try to find ways to increase access to the voting booth by having 24-hour voting polls open, by allowing drive-in voting. So there's a difference in philosophy and approach. So both parties, whoever's the majority, will do what they can to, one, to increase the vote, the other one to try to minimize and have a lot of restrictions on votes.
Well, and earlier we were talking about how, it used to be, you'd always hear that Washington was very partisan, but in Texas it wasn't as bad. I mean, people got along, they all talked to each other, ate lunch together. I mean, we were both there at the time and we saw how that works. And it seems to be going the other way. This session, there were a lot of issues that divided the legislature. And during this special session, the governor's put a lot of things on the call. Bail reform, more abortion restrictions, what can be taught in schools, a 13 check for retired teachers, restoring funding for you guys, for the legislators and your staff and others that he had cut. There's a lot on there. So are there any items on that special session call that you can support, or do you consider all of these to be red meat items that are appealing to the right?
I guess, let me put in proper context. There are many issues now that are being taken up by Republican legislators throughout the nation based on a nationwide strategy, what we call culture issues. I mean, some of those issues I never heard about. For example, the critical race theory. I think they teach it in college, not in any high school. Never heard anything about that. Now they made it into a culture issue. Sometimes I think somebody is in somewhere, some think tank, thinking up all these issues. How do we make a culture issue and start a war and get people out with all this misinformation that goes through social media? Transgender athletes. I have never heard a complaint from a parent about their daughter being able to compete against a transgender athlete. Never. To me, those issues ought to be worked out by your local school districts, your parents, the students, not us. There's not that government shouldn't be interfering with that. You all take care of that. I mean, you're the moms and the dads, and you're the teachers. I mean, you're the students. Let them work that out. That's the way it should be. Now, in the whole social media, for example, they're trying to find a way to, quite frankly, control social media, and you're never going to be able to do that. We're not China. Are there some issues that I would support? Yes. 13 check for our retired school teachers. I think this is very important. Our retired school teachers are on a limited income, and the cost of healthcare continues to go up. At the same time, inflation now is pushing the cost of groceries up. So that is very important. I think bail reform. Bail reform is very important. I support that. What it is that we are allowing too many violent people who are being charged with violent crimes and sexual crimes are being let out on PR bonds. The judges don't have a system in place to be able to get the criminal history of that person in front of the judge. So we are changing that. We are setting up a system statewide where we are providing that information to the judge immediately within 24 hours. So the judge can make informed decisions what type of bond to set for that person. There have been so many crimes out of Harris County being committed by offenders who may be the second or third PR bond, personal recognizance bond. That is unacceptable for the public. Another bill that I support would be dating violence. Finding ways to educate our kids and students in high school and junior high about dating violence. It's a big issue, a big problem. Our young people are just maturing. They are just growing up. They're starting relationships. How do you teach them to make sure they can recognize all the signs of somebody being a violent person, somebody that they need to stay away from? So I support that. So yes, there are some issues in legislation that we need. The other big issue has to do with our schools. We are holding money. Some of it we already released, but certainly we now have $11 billion under the American Care Act or Rescue Act that we are ready to start distributing statewide, not only to schools but also to hospitals or other needs that we have as a state.
And you got 30 days to do it. Well, of course, you can call another special session and another. And we know that y'all are going to be back for redistricting soon. And, you know, I think a lot of people don't really understand redistricting. They hear about it. They know that it goes on. It's connected to census because, of course, you get your numbers from census, and that's how you do your redistricting every 10 years. But why is redistricting so important?
Well, let me back up so just clarify that a special session, the governor controls the agenda. We don't. He's the one, the governor, the one that sets these are the issues you'll take up. Redistricting. That is the most partisan issues that we take up in the legislature, where every 10 years we do the census. And every 10 years we have to redraw the lines for the United States Congress, for the Texas Senate, for the Texas House of Representatives, and I think the State School Board of Education. Texas is very fortunate. It's how we divide power, right? Divide power on a nationwide basis because every congressional seat has to have pretty much the same number of people. Well, those states that lose population, guess what? They lose congressional seats. And there are only 435 in the United States. Those states that gain population and they gain congressional seats, which Texas gained 2, means we have more power and more votes in Congress. So it's power. And here in Texas, and I'll talk about the Texas Senate and the Texas House in a minute. Here in Texas, our population grew by almost 4 million people during the last 10 years. 83%, 85% of that growth was minority growth. Hispanics, African Americans, Asians, and other. 83 to 85% of the growth. Okay? 40% of the Texas population is white, more or less. 40% is Hispanic, more or less. Less than 1% difference. The rest are Asian, African Americans, and there are other categories. The growth that was driven by the census was minorities. Are we getting any more additional congressional seats for minorities? Probably not. And the reason for that is because the United States Supreme Court has made it very clear that they do not want to deal with partisan redistricting, gerrymandering. And to me that's wrong, because it's not only the state of Texas. Texas here is controlled by the Republicans. In other states where the Democrats control, they do the same thing. Right? They select the voters. You don't elect us, or you don't select us. We select you by drawing the districts any way we want to. They are so computerized, and the data is so to the person that it's very easy to draw a district that you know how they voted, you know the patterns, how many minorities they have, how many children they have. It is amazing how detailed those computers are. We now have that. The census was delayed because of COVID. September 1st, we will get all the data in from the census complete on what we call Red Apple, which is a huge computer process we have in the state. We will meet, start having hearings for about a week after September 1st. Then we'll have another special session on September 16th to do redistricting. And then we have to deadline on November 15th. I'm sorry. Yeah, I think it's November 15th to get the redistricting bills out. So who loses, who wins here in Texas? I mean, we're winning. We're the only state that has added 2 congressional districts. Other states lost. On the local level, there are 150 House districts. There are only 31 Senate districts. So we have to redraw them more or less equal population with about a 5 to 10% from the highest number to the lowest number. But they got to be more or less within that range. Congressional seats, we don't have any leeway. On the Texas Senate and House district, we do. And why is that important? The Valley has grown at about 12% rate. So we're growing very fast, but not compared to the rest of the state. I think the rest of the state is around 16, 18%. But that areas like in Harris County, Collins County, Dallas-Fort Worth, Central Texas, in the San Marcos area, they're exploding in growth, or 20% growth. That means that in all our districts, we have lost population in terms of trying to equalize the same number of people. I don't know if it makes sense. And Richard Molina, Mayor Molina is correct. The city of Edinburg is the only one, the state of Canales district, who is in the plus. It's over what is required to be equal population. My central district lost 8,000 people. Santa Lucia's district lost 130,000 people. Every state district here lost anywhere from 10,000, 5,000. The ideal Senate district is about 950,000, more or less, close to 1 million people. The ideal congressional district is about 750,000. The House district, I think it's 150,000. That gives you an idea of what it is. So for us, when we redraw the district lines for the Valley, we have to move up, take some more territory from some of the other parts of the state where they gain. For example, Senator Colcurst, which is the northern part of my district, she gained. Senator Zaparini, I think, lost some population. And I have all the numbers here to go one by one. It's a very detailed. What does that mean for us? Well, we're not gaining another congressional district. On the contrary, it is possible that we may end up having drawn a much more competitive districts in terms of Democrat versus Republican. And I will guarantee you the Republicans are going to try to gerrymander so they can get a foothold here in South Texas and create a congressional district. That's just the nature of politics, and it's pure raw power. There's the numbers. I tell people, elections have consequences. Okay? Elections have consequences. That's what we're dealing with.
Well, and so to connect the dots, that's why this voter legislation has been so critical, and there's been such a big fight over it, because if you make it harder to vote, less come out and vote, and typically they've seen that when these types of barriers are put in, it's the Democrats that lose, right? Because a lot of them rely on the late hours or the Sundays or drive-through voting, all that. So you lose Democrat vote, that means then that you're going to have more Republicans elected, and then those Republicans are going to then draw the lines for the districts, and those districts last for 10 years. And if they're still in control, then you get another 10 years, and you can draw them to gain even more power. So all of these things, they go together, and it's no accident that things are happening the way they are, and that's why there's such a fight in Texas right now. Is that correct?
I think you described it very well. But I do want to point out about partisanship. The vast majority of issues that we as a legislature deal with are not partisan. It's how do we make government work? How do we fund our schools? How do we fund our higher education? How do we deal with health care? There's a vast majority of issues. The reason it seems a lot more partisan right now is because it's a governor's cycle. It's the governor's turn to run for re-election. And Governor Abbott right now has already 2 opponents in the Republican primary, which is really unheard of. Governor Abbott overall has done a good job, but now he's being forced to push to take up some of these issues to take care of his base. I mean, this is just raw politics, and that's the way it works. But pretty much, so you'll see a lot more issues that are your red meat issues to apply and attract your base to get out and vote and support you. That's just the way it is. Now, come the general election, and I don't know there's a Democratic nominee at this point. There isn't. On the Democratic side, it's the other way around. On the Democratic side, they try to go to the left in the Democratic primary. And then somewhere in the general election, both sides sort of move more to the middle. It's just the nature of politics. The way it is in the Republican primary, you have the far right taking out a lot of conservative Republicans. The Democratic primaries, you saw many of the far left taking out conservative Democrats, and that's what's happening right now.
Okay, so now to keep on time, I'm going to get into a little bit about the budget and things that did happen during the session. We know that there was a drop in oil and gas prices, and everybody was very worried about how much money the state was going to have at the end of the day. But and especially during the pandemic. So how did we ultimately do budget-wise, and were there any big winners or losers?
We did very well. What was happening is, yes, the price of oil and gas was crashing. The budget that we passed was $248 billion. And we kept our commitment to education. The $11 billion increase we had session 4 last, we kept all that. But the reason that we did so well, the federal government under the CARES Act appropriated over $100 million. $100 million, it's not pocket change, for the state of Texas, spread throughout the state. Not only in the money they gave to the state, but also what they gave to the counties, and what they gave to the schools, what they gave to the hospitals, and what they paid in unemployment benefits, extra unemployment benefits. So there was plenty of cash floating in the economy. Our problem was that we were shut down. Right? So we did receive quite a bit of money. And our economy was always been very strong. It's one of the strongest economies in the nation. So the cuts, we didn't make any cuts. Session 4 last, the budget was $254 billion. And the difference is that Session 4 last, we used $6 billion of the rainy day fund to shore up the pension fund for teachers. I think put close to $1 billion to make it actually sound. We used that money to provide a base for health care for our teachers. So we used those funds strategically so that we wouldn't have to make any cuts. Right now, even though the price of oil is time to go up, we're projecting another balance of somewhere around $10 to $11 billion in the rainy day fund, which is the state savings account. The amount of money is coming into the state is coming in from the federal government. We don't write hot checks here in Texas. We're a pay-as-you-go state. The federal government, under the CARES Act, just for Hidalgo County alone, appropriated $159 million to help out with healthcare costs. And that money was shared with many of the cities through negotiations and what have you. Now, under the American Rescue Act, we have $11 billion the state of Texas has. Hidalgo County has $212 million. City of Edinburg has $27 million. So money is coming in. And people also are starting to spend it. There's a lot of pent up cash or discretionary money with a lot of families that they are now trying to spend. The problem is we have shortage in just about every category as we try to gear up in our supply chains. But the budget itself was a very good budget for us here for Rio Grande Valley, and I can go into details of that if you'd like me to.
Well, I know that the schools continue to get the $5 billion that y'all had appropriated for them previously in the prior session, which was good because the schools were, worried about whether they were going to have to cut staff or cut teachers and all that. So none of that's going to have to happen as a result of the funding that happened. One thing I know that didn't happen was on healthcare, there was a big push to expand Medicaid, because if you do that, then there was, I think, $5 billion that the state could have brought in of federal money that the state pays in and that they would get back from the federal government, but that didn't move. Medicaid expansion, again, didn't have any traction. Could you tell us a little bit about that and why it didn't happen?
Because the leadership opposes it. We are leaving probably over 90 to 100 billion dollars on the table to help with healthcare. Even Republican states have taken Medicaid and they're being offered, expanding Medicaid on the monies being offered by the federal government. One of the arguments against taking the money is that we expect Medicaid, this is only good for 10 years. Well, that's not the case. Congress can change its mind any time. But that money would help take care of many people who don't have health insurance. They would help take care of people who are in the poverty line. They will also help many of our hospitals, healthcare providers, for them to get reimbursed on many of the patients they see, because by federal law, somebody shows up in the emergency room, they got to take care of that person. So Medicaid's a big issue. We have tried many ways to try and negotiate and call it the Texas plan. Right? And we were almost there last session. But then the administration changed. It's now a Democratic administration up in Washington, D.C. So the rules change, certain requirements change. So it's sad because we have so many people who are suffering, who don't have the medical health care they need, and they're in the poverty line or under poverty. They're in poverty, period. And we have so many families that don't earn a living wage that we as a society need to find a way to provide them assistance. Because at the end of the day, we end up paying, all of us paying one way or the other. And the reason how we pay, if you're not insured, well, guess what? They're going to raise your insurance rates to try to cover that loss that the hospital is taking. You can pay cash, well, guess what? They're going to increase your healthcare costs to cover the loss that they took because they had to take care of this patient who had no money and was poor. So you have those varying challenges.
Well, and they always tell you, what happens a lot of times is that you get doctors in that say, we're not accepting any more new patients, or we're not accepting Medicaid patients. And so those folks will end up going to the emergency room, which is a higher cost. And then that cost is going to get passed on because the consumer will end up paying for it. So, for those of us that think, hey, well, I don't want to have to pay for somebody else, you're going to pay for somebody else anyway. Is that right?
I think Medicaid would be the right way to go. We can modify it and make it fit Texas, the needs that we have here in our state. We can even modify some of the rules to maximize the federal dollars that belong to us. It's from our income taxes that we pay, that we send up to Washington, D.C. They're trying to give it back to us to help us with some of the challenges we face in healthcare. And I would like to say healthcare is not a luxury, it's a necessity. It impacts our children to go to school, it impacts our workforce, and it impacts all of us.
Well, one thing that y'all did do, and in fact you did for us as our senator that carried the bill, is that we started a residency program for podiatry here, or podiatry will allow us to now, we will be able to get what we call graduate medical education, residency in podiatry, and apply for grants through the state. And we want to thank you for having done that for UTRGV. Podiatry is very important to us, as you know, because we have so many diabetic patients here in the Rio Grande Valley, and I think we probably all know somebody who suffers from diabetes or maybe has had to have an amputation. So thank you Senator, for doing that for us, for carrying that bill, and now we look forward. I know Dr. Hawker is starting that program here at the medical school, and we look forward to being able to have residents that are podiatrists.
We'll probably have the first podiatry part of our medical school on the state of Texas.
Yes, sir.
And it's really amazing because I deal with all type of issues. Every session I carry about 80, 90 to 100 pieces of legislation. And I probably have a list of maybe $500 million funding requests, not only from my central district, but from other parts of the state, from the Boys and Girl Scouts programs to AIM programs for children, all across the board. But in healthcare, there's always a turf fight, scope of practice between the doctors. Podiatrists, I guess, deals with ankle down, and it's really amazing because what I found out, I always learn a lot when I look at all these issues and research, is that we have podiatrists. Here in the Valley, we have a very high rate of diabetes, one of the highest in the state, and many of them have to be amputated. They lose their leg, they lose their feet. And having a podiatrist in the diabetic team that treats that person increases the chances by 80% or lower the chance by 80%, I can't say that either way, of getting amputated. In other words, it increases the chances of saving a limb, your leg, your foot. So podiatrists play a very important part in dealing with diabetes and obesity and some of those issues that we have here in the Valley.
Absolutely, and as you mentioned, UTRGV will have the first school podiatry in the entire state of Texas, so we're very excited about that. And it's a testament to the good work that is being done and how we're expanding healthcare here in the Rio Grande Valley. Y'all also had, in the middle of all of the other issues that were going on, we had that winter storm. And the winter storm caused people to have their electricity go off. I know we had at our home almost 4 days without electricity. That is really tough. And so everybody was talking about, well, ERCOT and the grid and what are we going to do this session so that we will prevent that from ever happening again. What did the legislature do to assure that this would not happen again?
You know, this is a very complicated issue, and I think it's a very good question because we didn't do as much as we wanted to. The normal rate per hour, kilowatt hour, is $30. $30. During the winter storm, it went up to $9,000, which was the max, the cap. So you have, the way the grid or the electricity is done here in Texas, you have your retail companies that deliver the electricity to your home, and they have your generators that generate the electricity. So the generators obviously had set the price, but they were not winterized. So many of the generators run by gas froze. So that increased the price for the generation of electricity to the retailers. They're delivering the electricity to your house, which means there's a scarcity of that. They got to cut off certain parts of the state. You cannot get electricity. And if you do get electricity, well, guess what? Your electric bill will triple or go up 10 times. I mean, I had calls of people having all of a sudden got bills in the thousands. So what we wanted to do in the Senate, I'll speak only for the Senate, we wanted to set up a system where we use some of the CARE Act funding and some of the money to reimburse consumers. We're trying to set up a method, which will identify those consumers that were over the head and couldn't pay the bills to reimburse them directly, help them out. Number two, and they didn't go anyplace. It takes the House and the Senate, the House, the Senate, and the governor to agree to it. There was no agreement and consensus. We then passed a bill that would allow up to $2.1 billion of financing available. They call secularization, but it's financing like a mortgage home to the retailers, right? The ones that deliver the electricity to you, because they were the ones that took the big hit. 2.1 million amortized for over 20 years, 30 years. That means that your bill will stay pretty stable, but maybe add 50 cents every time you got the bill, 75 cents. But keep in mind that some of these large corporations own both the generator, the generator of the electricity, plus they also own the retail that delivers the electricity. Two of those companies dominate and control 75% of the market. Right? So we did not want them to, okay, so you made over, and some of them did, you made billions of dollars on the generating side, but you lost over here on the retail side. So we want to balance it and net that out. And that's what we intended to do. Now, the bill that was passed, there's a dispute with the House because the House says, well, we don't want to net it out, which means that those people, those large corporations that own both a generating company but also have the retail, the delivery electricity, will end up making billions of dollars of profit.
Yeah, they get to double dip because they get both sides.
Exactly, they get to double dip, and at the same time, it's the customer who gets left with the bill. Right? So that's what we're trying to avoid right now. And the other one is that I wanted to mandate that all generators that produce all this energy be winterized, not only those that are crucial. And that needs to be done. I know that people don't want to talk about, or some people, about not having climate change, but our climates are changing. Look what's happening all over the world. So we have to be prepared. So we will continue pushing to winterize all the generators that we have. We'll continue pushing to find ways in case there's, I know still a lot of people out there dealing with high electric bills, how to stabilize that. So, and we're willing to also put money in the hundreds of millions from the state to help out. But it takes both the House and the governor to agree to that, and we couldn't get it past the House.
Well, I know we're going over time, and I'm going to end it on this one note, though, on border security, because we hear about this every time we turn on the TV. And for those of us living on the border, what is perceived and what is reality are sometimes completely different. But let me ask you this. I know the governor had mentioned that we were going to put $250 million towards a border wall that the state was going to start building. Is that $250 million coming from the general fund of the state, the monies that normally would go to pay for health care or for other priorities, transportation and others? Is that coming from there? And then I know he calls for donations as well. And then is $250 million even going to get us much of a barrier if they were to build one?
Let me address it this way. I think the governor is right on border security. I think he's wrong on the border wall. And on border security, it's a real issue for us. We have appropriated $3.2 billion in the last 6 years trying to address border security. It's not just for the border. It's also for the prison system. It's also to track down international gangs, transnational gangs that come in from Mexico. I mean, we're doing all that. Keep in mind, when we are overwhelmed with migrants, the Border Patrol has to process them. That means the Border Patrol is not out there along the river watching and guarding. So DPS, we put DPS to be able to interdict our highways, because that's when the cartels take advantage and smuggle more people that they can't get to the bridges. They're not families. They're just mostly are men, and many of them are men that have criminal records from Africa, from the Middle East, from all over the world. So it's a real challenge. And it's frustrating because both when Congress and the White House have been under control of the Democrats or controlled by the Republicans, both have failed to address this issue and leave us with this mess again and again and again. You pay attention, you'll see that you have congressmen, Democrats and Republicans come down here, they do a photo op, they use our gunboats, our helicopters, and then after a photo op, they take off and don't take any action whatsoever. There was a congressional hearing here in the Rio Grande Valley a couple of years back of both Democrats and Republicans from Congress. And the Republicans blamed the Democrats, pointed the finger at the Democrats. The Democrats blamed the Republicans and pointed the finger at the Republicans. Pointed the finger at each other. But then they wash their hands and they're out of here and still leave us with this mess. We're the ones that have to deal with it. Most of the people are just, it's a pass-through here in the Rio Grande Valley. There's guns going south, cash going south. Okay? There's human smuggling coming north and drugs. So it's a real issue. What's happening with Governor Abbott, he's frustrated like many of us. Some of the actions he's taken are unconstitutional, and I said that before, and certainly the federal courts have agreed so far. On the wall, the $250 million came from the Texas Department of Corrections, TDCJ. He has that authority under the Disaster Act. That's why he was asking the counties to declare disasters, to help them out. And he could use his powers and authority without approval from the legislature and taking action and transferring money. That's what he's doing. And all this fencing that he's doing, he's trying to find ways to, if you have someone, human trafficking or an immigrant that crosses that fence, they will get arrested for trespassing if it's private property. I think anybody, whether you're a legal resident or not, if you break the law, then you ought to be arrested. But there's so many that I think it's not Duval County, this Maverick County. In Maverick County, they emptied a prison to be able to arrest all these immigrants based on trespassing laws. Well, they're overwhelmed over there. The courts are overwhelmed. They hold them in jail 2, 3 days, 4 days, and then the judge lets them go, time served. So it is a real problem. Those of us who live here, go to McAllen bus station, you see bus after bus after bus after bus. Look, I want to be humanitarian. We will help people that are here, families that come and need help. But at the same time, we need to, a nation and a country that doesn't secure its borders, doesn't define its borders, it exists to be a country. We cannot just allow anybody and everybody to come into the United States. Right? We have to control it. Who are you? Where are you from? Why are you here? It's pretty basic principles of a democracy. You just can't have open borders. And I feel for these folks. If that's the case, then why don't we do Guatemala, Honduras, Salvador, make them 51 states, 52 states, the 53rd state. Make them states, right? We did that with Hawaii. My point is this. It's a real issue that we face every year. Our resources here, Catholic Charities done a great job, but they were overwhelmed also. They cannot test everybody for COVID. Now they moved them from up in Mission by the Zadua Bridge, keep them under the bridge. It's a real challenge. They are given a piece of paper. Pay attention to this because it's really important so people know what's going on. They give them a piece of paper that tells them, show up in court a year from now, 2 years from now. And with that piece of paper document, you can pass a checkpoint. Right? And then you disappear into the United States. Right? But they're going up to San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, Chicago, New York, Philadelphia. So it's, how do we control that?
Yeah, how many of us would actually go show up in court if you knew you were here illegally, but you were working and you have already gotten into the country and you're making a living and you're doing better than you were ever doing in your own home country? Who's going to show up in court to be deported? But I know we have run out of time. In fact, we've exceeded our time. I told you he was gonna take up, we were gonna take up the whole hour. But it is so interesting, and thank you so very much for being here, going over all these subjects and answering all my questions. We appreciate you very much, Senator, and best wishes with the rest of this special session and however many more are called.
Well, next time we'll talk about the funding for the airport in Edinburgh, $5 million.
Oh, nice.
We'll talk about the increase in funding for a medical school, about $3+ million. Funding increase for University of Texas, UTRGV. Funding increase in terms of financial aid for our students. I mean, the whole range of funding that we did here. Continuing $26.1 million to expand our Asador Bridge, $60 million for our infrastructure for our bridges. Continuing.
Can we get that, your office does have I know you produce a newsletter and y'all are looking at gathering all the numbers. Once we have that, and I see Carlos here, once we have all of that, we can share that with the chamber, right? And all the members, we can share the funding that actually came to each entity, to the different entities or the different areas.
Yes, we can.
Okay, terrific. Well, thank you so very much for joining us today, and thank you to Senator Hinojosa for your continued service to the state of Texas and the Rio Grande Valley.
Thank you all. Thank you all.